And welcome in. It's Egg Bowl week here for the entire state of Mississippi. Couldn't do what we do without all of our sponsors, and we're thankful for all of them. And couldn't do what we do from a content standpoint without our friends from Mississippi State and someone that has his nose to the ground and has for quite some time. You can find him over at On3. That's Maroon and White Daily with Paul Jones. They do a phenomenal job. That's Robbie Faulk. You can also catch him pretty much every day with Brian Haydad, who we heard from yesterday, was fantastic on the Thunder and Lightning podcast. Just heard they have recorded the Rumblings episode for this week, so I'm excited to hear that. And of course, you can catch him on WBLE 100.9 on Wednesday mornings for Talking Dogs. He's all over the place, and haven't gotten into the high school stuff, Robbie. But thanks for jumping in for a few minutes today.
Yeah, Brad, thanks for having me, man.
So this game, obviously, there's a lot of stuff going on outside the field. I want to kind of dig into kind of on the field a little bit from a Mississippi State standpoint. A lot of the questions I've asked Brian, I'm going to ask you because I think you guys have a really good working relationship because a lot of times you might differ on some stuff. So really, I'd like to start with how big of a game, from you look at it from a Jeff Lebby standpoint, is it for Mississippi State from just Jeff Lebby? Because it feels like I didn't watch all the games this year, watched a lot of them and listened to a lot when I was on the road, but it felt like that Texas game. I did watch the back half of that game in Oklahoma, and it felt like that he kind of lost control from a head coaching standpoint. Just from a program standpoint, how big is this game for Jeff Lebby in your opinion?
It's huge. You're going into year 3 next year, and I don't anticipate there being a coaching change, anything like that with Lebby. I think he's safe, but you're going into coaching your 3rd year next year, and the expectations grow tremendously from what they were this year, which was just find a way to get to a bowl game. State fans are going to be ready to win and compete next year. And to get this fan base on board with you, to get the financial backing that you want, to get the season ticket sales that you want, and to get just from a standpoint of this fan base trust you again, he really needs this ball game. There's a huge difference between 5-7 and not making a bowl game and 6-6 making a bowl game and beating your rival. That is a light years of difference for Mississippi State and Jeff Lebby. So when you're going into this game means everything to Jeff Lebby and Mississippi State to go win. It goes beyond anything else that's happened this year. You win this ball game, and your goals coming in the season was to go from 2 wins to 6 somehow. That Mississippi State had an over/under in wins of 3.5, and most of this fan base had them missing a bowl game. I know Brian does the media poll every year with Mississippi State media members. Every single person, I think, had them under 6 wins. So by that token, they've already had a better season than most of us thought. But how the season's played out, the State fans are expecting more. And to get to a 6th win, to get to bowl eligibility, I think the bulk of this fan base would be pretty happy with where things were with Jeff Lebby. But at the same time, if he loses, the bulk of this fan base has no trust in him. You look at 2 seasons now, he would have 1 SEC win, 0 wins at home in the SEC. That's a problem. For most coaches in the SEC, you don't survive that. Jeff Lebby's probably going to survive that. So this game is absolutely huge for him and his future at Mississippi State, and also how the fans view him going into year 3.
From a university standpoint, athlete department, I know you and Brian do a great job of kind of looking at stuff outside the lines, if you will, logos, uniforms, the right shade of maroon, if you will. One thing that I found interesting is new lights at Davis Wade Stadium, and just things like that kind of fall on the umbrella of Director of Athletics Zach Selman. How vibrant is the athletic department under Selman's leadership over the last couple of years? I know the interlocking logo, the script state. There's been some changes over the last couple of years, and it appears that Zach is listening somewhat to the fans. But from an overall standpoint, how vibrant is the athletic department?
I think it's gotten in very good shape. They've started to listen to fans. They do things that fans want because they want to get more engagement from the fans. They want more money and they want more butts in the seats is what it boils down to. And a lot of times to do that, you have to cave in to what the fans want. What are some things that would make this fan base happy? And I think Zach Selman's done a really good job of listening to the fans, sitting back and kind of surveying the landscape and finding out what's best for Mississippi State. And this has been a very difficult time to do that because you're in a time frame where fans are having to pay for athletes. They're having to pay for season tickets. They're having to pay for projects on campus, all that stuff. And then the university side of things, they're having to spend more than ever because they're paying for athletes too, and they're paying for facilities. They're, the prices for everything has gone up. Zach Selman, when he came in, he had to kind of figure out what is best for business for Mississippi State. And he actually has had several conversations with some of us as well, because we are kind of the in between a lot of times from the fan base and him. We have access to Zach Selman more than the fans do. We have the opportunity to voice some of the concerns of the fan base. And that's a lot. That's how Brian and I a lot of times approach what we do in our podcasts and things like that. We speak for the fans a lot of times. They like to hear us get angry from what we've seen in a football game. They want to hear us complain about the lights and the sound and the jerseys. Now, there's a segment of the fan base they don't want to hear any of that. They just want to talk about the football game and they just want to win. But my standpoint on that is you can win and you can also do these things that's going to make your university a lot better, and it's going to be viewed in a much different light than it was. I thought up to last year, Mississippi State had one of the worst fan experiences in the SEC at a football stadium. And in the off season, I thought that changed tremendously just by upgrading the lighting system and what they do from a game day atmosphere standpoint. Mississippi State's atmosphere has caught up a little bit to some of the rest of the league, and it's got a long way to go. But spending that money, I thought, was a wise investment for Zach Selman. But I think he was wrestling with that for a little bit. Would it be better for us to push this in the revenue share, or should we spend this money to make our stadium and make our game day atmosphere a much better experience for fans? And I think that's important because at the end of the day, tickets drive revenue.
Yeah.
Having fans in the stands is a recruiting opportunity for you as well, and it's still important to make a game day atmosphere as exciting as it can possibly be because you're talking about competing with television and sitting on your couch every week. So from that standpoint, I think he has done a great job. He's done an excellent job of raising money for the university. Last year, they set a record for fundraising, which came after a 2-10 season in football. So that to me speaks to the fact that he's really good at building relationships and he's really good at selling his vision for Mississippi State athletics. But I do think that he's done a really good job of kind of resetting here at Mississippi State. It was in a bad spot when John Cohen left, and he's done a really good job of kind of pushing Mississippi State forward and putting a nice coat of paint on the university and athletics.
Yeah, the head coaching of non-Olympic sports right now, I think, is in a pretty good spot. And if anything, there was some collateral gained by Brian O'Connor. If anything, other than a College World Series appearance, I think Mississippi State fans will be disappointed with how well he's recruiting, how well the enthusiasm is around the baseball program, which will happen in a couple of months. But you look at basketball, and yeah, I know Chris Jans, and there's been some rocky games here early, but he's proven that he is a really good basketball coach, and Sam Purcell to a certain extent the same. Your thoughts on where the head coaches are at Mississippi State? It feels like that the Brian O'Connor hire has kind of got things back on track.
It's a really good group. I think you look at how healthy they are with Matt Roberts at tennis. That might be the most consistent program that they have on campus. Matt Roberts has done an unbelievable job with the tennis team over the years, and women's tennis has gotten a boost as well. Julie Darty Dennis has been solid the last few years. Samantha Ricketts has done things here that haven't been done before. They hosted a super regional a couple years ago. They've been inside the top 25 the last couple of years. She has really got the softball program going. And then some of the other sports, both golf teams are very good, have been really healthy as well. All those sports, they kind of go under the radar, but that's been a really good spot for Mississippi State. Soccer, that was the worst program in the SEC the soccer program at Mississippi State was the worst in the SEC before James Armstrong arrived, and they won the SEC championship last year. This year they were inside the top 15 with Nick Zimmerman, who was promoted. So all those sports they go under the radar, but they are really healthy right now. Both basketball programs are fairly healthy, regardless of what's happening with the men right now. And then you got baseball, which I think they hired a top three coach, might have been the best fit possible for Mississippi State baseball with the vision that Brian O'Connor has, the ability to evaluate and develop. He's perfect for Mississippi State. So you look at all those things and you say, oh, the athletic department is probably in a really good spot right now, and I think it is. But the perception of it is not what it should be because football is not
Yeah.
right now. And that is the snapshot of your university. What football does is how the rest of the university is viewed. No, if you're Ohio State right now, they look at the university as one of the healthiest athletic departments in the country. But I'm sure the other sports are not nearly on the same level as what they do in football because that drives your revenue. So it is something that they've got to figure out. And whether that's with Jeff Lebby or not, that's got to be figured out in the next couple of years. But they've got to get football going and football in a good spot because it is affecting some of these other sports, I think, long term. You look at women's basketball, and I think they're taking a little bit of a step back from a roster standpoint because they've had to take some of those boosters from women's basketball to give to football to kind of get it back where it was. So they're not able to do what they usually want to do in women's basketball. And some of these other sports are the same way. So I think the long term effect is going to hurt those sports because football is not where it needs to be. So that's the focus of Mississippi State right now is getting football back on track. And they've done a really good job of balancing, really investing in baseball because they're putting a lot of money in baseball, but also they're still putting a lot of money into football too. So they've done a good job of balancing that, but the results have got to come up for Jeff Lebby.
Yeah, I know they baseball. By the way, I know they brought a lot of former players back Friday night a couple weeks ago, and it was a really good podcast. And I texted Joel Coleman, who works for the university, interviewed Will Clark, Rafael Palmeiro. While I enjoyed getting to hear those guys, what was really, I'm sure, refreshing from an MSU standpoint is how complimentary they were of Coach Brian O'Connor and what he brings to the table. So it's going to be interesting to watch. Once again, I think they're absolutely loaded. You talked about finances, Robbie, and I know early on in the world of NIL, Mississippi State maybe was coming from behind. The word I've gotten is that has changed or shifted over the last 6 months to a year. The NIL budget for Mississippi State is I think much better than probably people think. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, it is, and it's taken a lot of groundwork to get it off the ground. State was far behind
Yeah.
in NIL when John Cohen was here. When he left, they just didn't really have a plan. And I credit Charlie Winfield for kind of picking up the ball there and creating the Bulldog Initiative because nobody else was going to do it. They were doing some things when Cohen was here for baseball, but there was really no plan. They had no plan for what they were going to do from an NIL standpoint. And Charlie Winfield did an incredible job of just grassrooting it. I mean, he did all the legwork himself, and I know it wore him to a nub. And they've kind of Mississippi State's kind of picked it up a little bit here and helped him out. And they've added, obviously, the Bulldog Initiative's added people to their staff, and it's just in a much better spot than it was. But it took some time. Like it took some time to get Mississippi State people involved. A lot of people in this fan base didn't like it, and they didn't really want to do anything with it. But I think what people understood pretty quickly, and it was evident last year, probably I would say the tipping point was when they lost to Toledo in football, and they decided, we've got to do something about this, and we've got to get better players. We've got to put more resources into football. If we don't, we're going to fall to the bottom of the ocean, pretty much. And that's what they did. It was very much an adapt or die thing for Mississippi State. And I think at this point, I wouldn't say they're where they want to be, but they are in a position where they can compete inside this league. They still need to get better in that regard. But they're in a solid spot right now and trying to build. And I think that's why this game is so big because you have to go back to those boosters in the offseason and ask for more money and go get better players to take this thing the next step. It's hard to convince these people with 7 wins in 2 years. Now, eight's not that much better, but getting to the bowl game shows incredible improvement. It's hard to convince those people that they should give to that when you're 5-7. So that's why I think this game's so big for Lebby.
Yeah, and I would guess too, being able to go to those boosters and say, "Hey, yeah, we only won 6 games, but we did beat Ole Miss, and we are going to a bowl game, and the future is much brighter than it was the year before." I would think that sales pitch would be much more positive. Looking at the game, Robbie, I would love your thoughts on what's it going to take for Mississippi State to win this game. FanDuel came out, I think it was last week. It was 12.5. It opened at 9.5 on Sunday. And as we record on Tuesday, that line's already down to 6.5 according to FanDuel. I think a lot of that is off the field circus things going on at Ole Miss. So I think two, you have to look at the component of a rivalry game. It's in Starkville, which is I know they haven't won a ton of games there under Lebby's tenure, but my goodness, how many games could we talk about Mississippi State should have won in Starkville that they haven't? What's the path for victory for Mississippi State on Friday for you?
Well, I think you do have to factor in the fact that you have this stuff going on with Kiffin. I don't think there's any doubt that there's distraction there. I know that the tweets came out from Trinidad, Chambliss, Keywan Lacey, some of those guys. There's no doubt that it's a distraction in that locker room. And I think that plays somewhat of a factor. But at the end of the day, once you get inside the ball game and you hit each other a little bit, a lot of that starts to fade and it gets back to execution and coaching and all that stuff. And I think that it will probably factor in for a little bit of the ball game, and then it will come down to whether or not Mississippi State can execute and whether or not Jeff Lebby's making the correct calls. He's doing the right things at the right time, which has been a problem at times. And for Ole Miss on the flip side, they've had several games that they very easily could have lost. I mean, you look at Arkansas, the way that game was shifting momentum wise. Florida had the ball down 3 late in the game and had a chance there. Oklahoma had an opportunity. But what happened in all those games is they went and made a play to win the game. And that's kind of the difference between State and Ole Miss right now is Ole Miss has had some close games, and they found ways to make plays to win. Mississippi State has had some close games, and they found ways to lose. So for State, it's execution first and foremost for me because I don't think it's always about a play call or a misstep from Jeff Lebby. Now it does fall on his shoulders as the head coach that they're making these mistakes, but to me it's more about player execution in games like that than it is a play call or anything like that. And State has had some key penalties, false starts and holdings and things like that. They've had turnovers. They've on defense they've given up a big play here and there. They've got to limit what Ole Miss does from a big play perspective, and they've got to establish the run game themselves. And to me, I continue to believe Mississippi State's best path offensively in this game is with freshman Kamario Taylor, and that's been my position for the last several weeks. I think that there's obviously a chance that he could come out there and he can fall on his face, but I just don't see that. I think there's some mistakes that he can make throughout a ball game. I don't see him getting swallowed up by the moment, and he has the ability to move the pocket. He has the ability to read a defense and pull the ball and get a big chunk play on the ground. He's also a guy that the defense has to account for in that way, and that factors. That you don't have that with Blake Shapen. The defense isn't worried about him running the football. He ran the football 14 times, I think, against Missouri, 17 total when you count sacks, and he had like 19 yards rushing. So it's not a guy that's going to scare you in the run game. Kamario Taylor is, and when you have that behind center and you have a guy that can do all those things, I just think it makes your offense significantly more dangerous. So I think this could be a Chris Relf 2009 opportunity for Kamario Taylor if Jeff Lebby goes along with it. Will he go along with it is the big question. That's the one that State fans have been asking all week. But that to me is your best chance to win this ball game. If you're Mississippi State, is Kamario Taylor factors in with the run game in the pass.
Yeah, there will not be that element of surprise that it was back in '08 because nobody in the stadium thought they expected Tyson Lee to finish the game, and then here comes Chris Relf, and he completely took the game over. Now, I'm not saying that Kamario won't come in and run for 200 and throw for 100 and state wins. That's not what I'm saying. But it won't be a surprise if he does that. What's a good comp for Kamario for you right now?
Man, in high school, I thought Jason Campbell was a
Yeah,
was a good comp, but he's kind of elevated his game, and he's a guy that can beat you with his legs. I don't know if I've seen a guy like that at Mississippi State. Um, obviously Dak Prescott by the time he left was a guy that could really do both. That could beat you with his arms and legs, but these two are not the same from a tools perspective. He's got a stronger arm than Dak. He's a more physical guy than Dak, which is saying a lot because Dak was a very physical runner. But you're talking about 6'4", 220, 225, built like a truck. He can run the football. He's really advanced his game in that perspective, and that's really grown over the last few years. I was surprised when I saw him last year, his senior year at Noxubee, because he had not shown that quite as much the previous years. And when I saw that, I thought, man, that's scary. If he can add that element to his
yeah.
game, that's really scary because you get him out of the pocket. He has the ability to, stretch a play and let a guy get open and chunk it. He can beat you with his arm there. But if he decides to tuck it and run, you get a defensive back one-on-one with that. It's going to be a tough challenge. So I don't know. I don't know what the comp is for him right now. I always thought Jason Campbell was a good comp,
KJ
when he was in high
Jefferson,
school.
KJ Jefferson from Arkansas, maybe.
I think a little bit. I think a little bit better arm. I think he's going to
Okay.
have a better arm than KJ long term. Um, right now, maybe a better runner at times too. A little more swift, maybe, but maybe not as physical than KJ. But that might be a closer comp than anybody else right now. But he's got a chance to be really special if he puts it all together. I like the tools. I like the attitude. Very confident kid.
Yeah.
I just don't think he's going to be overwhelmed by the moment.
So I understand the question I'm about to ask you. If you answered it differently, you may should be the head coach and not behind a screen. Why is he not playing more? Is it just because Shapen is more of a program quarterback under the Lebby system, or it's not one he's not wanting to adapt, he's wanting to save, he's wanting to allow Shapen to go out on his own? What's the rationale in your opinion? I understand it's kind of subjective here, but hearing you talk about Kamario Taylor, who I saw at Noxubee, who I was just blown away with, and then who I've seen in limited roles this year, I'm kind of leaning with you. Why is he not playing more?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, he's got to be seeing something at practice that he doesn't feel like he's ready. I guess all we can go on is what we see in games,
Right.
and from this point, I think I can accurately say that I don't think that there's a large gap with the things that Blake Shapen does really well and the possibility of things that Kamario Taylor could do that's wrong. You're not getting enough from Blake Shapen to justify that, in my opinion. And I continue to say this. I don't think that Blake Shapen is the issue for Mississippi State. I don't think it's a Blake Shapen problem. I think
I
it's an
agree.
offensive line
Yeah.
problem. I think Mississippi State's offensive line does not have the ability to do what it needs to do to bring out the strengths of Blake Shapen, which is the deep ball, which is allowing him time to let Brennan Thompson or Anthony Evans get open, which has happened against everybody, and get the ball down the field to him. He doesn't have the time to do that. So when you have that, and you have a guy that has been injury prone, so he doesn't need to take hits, and you have a guy that has the propensity to take sacks, and he holds on to the ball too long, he can't escape the pocket like you needed him to. To me, the logical answer is to get a guy in there that can alleviate some of the problems that you have on the offensive line. You have a lot of problems up front protecting the quarterback. Why would you not get the more mobile guy that's going to allow you to take some of that pressure off? But for whatever reason, Jeff Lebby, I don't know if he just doesn't want to rush Camario in there. I don't know if he doesn't want to show too much of him to have him tampered with, but I think that's going to happen anyway. You got to do what's best for your team. You got to do what's going to allow you to win ball games. And I'm not sure if it could be a situation where he just feels like he owes something to Blake Shapen.
Yeah.
Blake has stuck it out. He came back for another year, and he doesn't want to take that away from him. I could totally see that. Coaches, they will lose through loyalty all the time. So I could totally see that. I don't know what it is to firmly tell you, that an answer there. I don't know what it is, but it's obvious to a lot of people in the fan base that the ceiling of the offense is much higher with Mario Taylor because of his skill set.
I'll say this: I have seen Shapen throw some really good balls, specifically against Arkansas, Texas, and like I said, he's not the reason that Mississippi State lost to Texas, to Florida, to Tennessee. There were overarching problems. One thing too that I saw last week, Ahmad Hardy just kind of made work out of that Mississippi State defense. What is Ole Miss? I guess obviously Lacey. You would think Ole Miss is kind of licking their chops with that opportunity. What does Mississippi State have to do to limit Lacey, and what happened against Missouri a couple of weeks ago?
No, just I think that this team really struggles tackling. They're not a very good tackling team. And so the first hit is usually not a tackle from these players. And when you have big, strong running backs like that, like Ahmad Hardy, which still blows my mind that
From
um,
Mississippi.
yeah, and in-state schools. I mean, no, everybody was at fault
Yeah.
for not taking him out of high school, but I know State and Ole Miss recruited him out of the transfer portal. Um, State just was not willing to spend that kind of money. He was asking a pretty high price. I imagine Ole Miss was kind of in the same position there too, and I feel like State and Ole Miss both got good running backs, so it wasn't just a tremendous loss, but that's a guy that he's just really strong and he's one of the best in the country at yards after contact. And if you don't wrap him up and bring him to the ground, you're in trouble. And that's what happened in this game. The yards after contact was just insane. And this defense is just not built to stop the run. I don't think the scheme has not been good. They're not in the right place. They're not taking good angles. They're not tackling well. It's just a multitude of issues, and it all falls on Coleman Hutzler. It's just this has not been a um, a great showing from Coleman Hutzler these 2 years. Last year they had one of the worst defenses in Mississippi State history. This year's been better, but it's still a bad defense. And it all falls on Coleman Hutzler. I mean, he's not putting them in position to succeed enough, especially against teams that can run the football. We saw Arizona State last year, Cam Scatabo had nearly 300 yards, and they just refused to put people in the box to stop it. And Sam Levitt couldn't throw the football, and you still could not put the numbers in the box to stop it. And we kind of saw that last week or 2 weeks ago against Missouri too. There were a lot of times where the looks were just. I mean, I'm running it all day. I thought Drinkwitz should have ran it another 15 times than he did in that ball game. There were a couple possessions that they decided to throw it, and I'm sitting there thinking, what kind of moron is throwing the football right now against this defense? But that's coaches sometimes are they want to prove they're a lot smarter than the average person. If I'm Ole Miss, I'm run heavy in this ball game. With whatever reads you need to take, if you want to run Trinidad Chambliss, Keywan Lacey, I'm going to dare Mississippi State to try to stop it. And until they do, I'm going to try to run the ball down their throats because I just don't think that this team is capable of consistently stopping the run, especially with a running back that gets downhill the way that Keywan Lacey does. It's very similar to Ahmad Hardy. So that's it's going to be a challenge for State to stop that. But if they do, I think that they have a chance in this ball game because you have some guys down the field that can make plays defensively. Kelly Jones has been one of the best cover corners in the country this year. So this is a game that I think that you could stack the box in a way that if you put Kelly Jones on the island, he can make plays back there. He'll probably lose his share of battles. There's some really good receivers at Ole Miss that are going to win those battles. But I also think that's probably State's best opportunity to get off the field is doing what it can to stop the run. Because if Ole Miss does establish the run, I just don't see a way that State's going to be able to stop their offense consistently.
The path to victory, before we let you go today, Robbie, thanks very much for joining us. For Mississippi State, I would assume turn Ole Miss over, get this thing into a rock fight, limit the run. And then offensively, we've seen Mississippi State put up some really big numbers. And then you throw in the fact of Kamario Taylor off the bench. I think to me, that's a very good game plan for Jeff Lebby and MSU to win this ball game on Friday. I'm one of these that think this is going to be a very difficult task for Ole Miss with what they have outside the lines. In between the lines, I think Mississippi State's going to be ready. And you talked about Cameron Hutzler, Jeff Lebby. They've had 2 weeks to prepare for this Ole Miss team. Your thoughts on what you think the path to victory for Mississippi State is on Friday?
Yeah, I think they will have to take advantage of mistakes there. And, Trinidad Chambliss has done a pretty good job of taking care of the football. They got to force him into turnovers. They got to strip the ball and get turnovers. This defense has been one of the best in the conference, actually, in forcing turnovers. That's the only thing that they do really well is they're very opportunistic. Even against Missouri, they forced a turnover in there with an interception. They find ways to get the ball. That's something that they have done well. But I think the defense it needs to be playing with his hair on fire. And they, for the most part, I feel like they have against Ole Miss. They usually play a really good defensive ball game. So that's important first and foremost on the defensive side of the ball. Sound in special teams. That's a cliche, but State has not been sound enough in the special teams area. They've got to be better there, and they've got to protect the football, and they got to be able to run the football offensively. And when you have big play capabilities, when you have those opportunities present themselves, you have to hit those shots down the field. So that to me is the biggest key in this game for Mississippi State. They really need to take care of the football, hit the big plays, establish the run, special teams play clean, and then on defense get the ball.
It doesn't matter if it's Mississippi State that's fighting for a great season or Ole Miss fighting for a good season. I know it's cliche, but legitimately you can throw the records out. It just doesn't matter. It's always Ole Miss and Mississippi State going toe-to-toe, and I expect a great game on Friday. Excited to see it. It's going to be a beautiful day in Starkville. No rain, temperature in the 50s, and, boy, exactly what you need for November football. He's Robbie Faulk, does a great job at Maroon and White Daily. That's an affiliate of On3, and of course co-host on Thunder and Lightning alongside Brian Haydad on Sports Talk Mississippi and their podcast network, and of course has Talking Dogs. That's on 100.9 WBLE, and that happens on Wednesday mornings, and does a great job, and we're grateful he joined us for a few minutes today. Thanks, Robbie.
Yeah, man. Appreciate you, Brad.